Hey team, welcome back to the channel, man. I'm stoked and pumped up to see you. Today we're going to be talking about unified land operations. These are some standard board questions we have. This is my actual packet that I take into competition boards where this particular subject is asked. And so we're gonna walk through some standard questions. I'm gonna give you some tips and some tricks that you can put in your kit bag to answer any question. And we're gonna keep this conversation rolling, man. As we're going through, if you do have some questions, some concerns, maybe it's a subject area that you want to hear more about, then make sure you drop it down into the comments below. So the very first thing, again, you can see in all of this, I cut and paste straight out of the regulation. And I don't ask soldiers what regulation covers anything, because I think that that's a cupcake and lollipop answer, and I don't have time for that, if that makes sense. Now, you need to make sure that you are prepared to answer questions and use the regulatory or the regulation itself as a part of your answer or as your answer, right? If you don't know, then you can always refer back, and that's not a go per se, but that could be at least a half go, which overall, if there's not a whole lot of that, may equal a go-ish. So what does unified land operations describe? Right, so unified land operations describe how the Army seizes, retains, exploits the initiative to gain and maintain a position of relative advantage in sustained land operations. Again, that's verbatim. So you may not be able to memorize that verbatim. And some of these other answers that we can find are a lot longer. The paragraphs might be huge, might be a long list. What you need to do is on a 3x5 card, put down what is unified land operations, describes how the Army wins America's wars. I mean, that's not the right answer, but it's at least half a right answer, right? It's actually would be more than half a right answer. Write down and summarize. Use a key word or phrase. Like in this one, you could say, "Man, unified first sergeant, don't call me man in a board." You're gonna fire me up. Unified land operations describes how the Army seizes, maintains, and controls land in the operation. I would give you a go for that. What is unified land operations? So unified land operations is the basics Army warfighting doctrine and the Army's contribution to unified action, right? What is the United States Army? Right, the United States Army are America's sons and daughters, men and women of courage and character, and leaders of consequence, bonded together in a profession of arms, organized, trained, and equipped to be the most decisive land force in the world. Hell yeah, that's who you are, right? So if you're asked any kind of question like that, you may not even recognize it. We're talking about unified land operations. We could talk about an army. We could talk about any number of soldiering discussions. If you started talking about the soldier's creed in and through your answer, and I think that's where this is important. Like, some people know the soldier's creed verbatim, right? And some people know the creed of the non-commissioned officer verbatim. But when you know it to such a degree that you can use some words or phrases out of the creeds in an answer, or maybe it's a counseling that you're writing, really puts a little different twist on it. So think about how you might be able to do that to answer this particular question of what is the United States Army? How could you use the soldier's creed to answer that question? What do the operational variables consist of? The operational variables are PMESI PT. Now, as junior enlisted, we don't talk a lot about operational variables. And in fact, most enlisted folks, unless you're on staff at the brigade or echelons or higher, we're not talking about that. Normally, we're going to be talking about operational variables, which are mission variables, which we will discuss here in a second. But they're very similar, and we're all trying to understand basically the same thing, but we just have some different parameters. So our operational variables are political, military, economic, social, information, infrastructure, physical environment, and time. Right? What is the operational environment? So the operational environment is a composite of the conditions, circumstances, and influences that affect the employment of capabilities. So when you think of, again, this is how can you put this into words that are saying what doctrine is saying, but maybe easier for you to be able to understand and convey. So operational variables are all of the conditions that influence how the Army is able to do its job. I'd give you a go for that. Army leaders plan, prepare, execute, and assess operations by analyzing the operational environment by using what variables? So again, the two variables that we use are operational and mission. And I want you to pay attention, because what I just said in this question is the operations process. So plan, prepare, execute, and assess. And you should know that verbatim and be able to use that again in your answers. What do the mission variables consist of? You were talking about MET-TC, right? So that's mission, enemy, terrain, troops, time, and civil considerations. And you should be able to understand MET-TC, right? And if you're a sergeant, man, I need you to know these and know what they consist of. So how do we describe the mission? How do we describe the enemy? What can we use to understand time? And how do we describe time when it comes to planning for an operation? What about terrain? Know some different variables that are out there, right? And those are all of the standard questions. I have a couple that are rephrased, like what does MET-TC stand for, and what does PMESI-PT stand for? Those are things that we've already kind of broken down and chewed on. So if you're asked a situational question, basically all these are just standard questions, kind of maybe encapsulated in a story about, maybe in this case it may be receiving an order or on how to plan. So for example, you just received an operations order or a fragmentary order or a warning order. And in this process, you're going to take your mission variables and apply them into the planning that you need to do for your phase of the operation. Describe to me what you're going to take into consideration. See, so what I just asked you is, what are the mission variables, right? Again, what is mission, enemy, terrain, troops, time, and civil considerations? Long format question to ask just a few words, right? Does that make sense? And every situational question is going to be like that. So when you ask a situational question, just think of, what is actually being asked. And if you don't get it in the question, then just ask for the question to be rephrased. And if you ask me to rephrase a question, I'm probably going to spit back out the exact same question. But most of my battles, they will accommodate you and rephrase the question. So, hey, team, that's all we got for Unified Land Operations. Leave some comments down below. That way we can continue to keep this conversation rolling. Appreciate all you guys, man. Till then, you stay out there, you keep grinding, and you stay stoked.